Good morning to you. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack here. This is Sunday, June 30th edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. So glad you joined me. Got a lot to talk about here. We have historic Hurricane Beryl, now the earliest Category 3 hurricane, major hurricane, this far east in the Atlantic Basin. And when I show you some of these stats, it is pretty astounding. And, you know, there could have been something stronger before the satellite era, before we had modern recon. Absolutely. But in the modern record, Beryl is definitely a historic event here. And it's just getting started. It is still intensifying right in front of our eyes based on recon data, satellite imagery, and so forth. And we're going to have a very dangerous, compact hurricane heading into the Windward Islands first. And then from there, we're going to have a lot of headaches to deal with as this moves through the Caribbean Sea. A lot of questions I'm sure that you have. I'll do my best to answer them. So again, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate your time and attention today. First of all, let's take a look at the bigger picture here. Overall, and I think I'll use blue here to highlight everything. Here's the setup. This is 94L, and we don't want to completely ignore this. This has a small window of opportunity to develop into a tropical depression or maybe a little stronger before moving ashore in Mexico. Big rainmaker over here. This, of course, is our historic hurricane, Category 3 now, Hurricane Beryl. And then this is 96L now over here. And it is likely to go on to develop into our next system. And this name would be Chris if it does so. So the overall background state, very favorable for development. And as you can clearly see, for the historic record here, it is June 30th. It is not August 30th or anything like that. And we need to really understand the context of all of this. We haven't seen anything like this since we've been doing this in the modern era. Absolutely. And even ship reports going back earlier, you know, to the 1900s and beyond. Yes, we had reliable ship records because that was how most commerce was accomplished. And those ship captains kept really good logs. There's actually a pretty good historic record of it. And we have not seen anything like this in a long, long time, if ever, right? So here's a close-up of it, the sort of true color, as we call it. Not quite what it would look like if you were looking down from 22,500 miles up or whatever it is, but pretty darn close to it. And you can see Beryl down here throwing out that energy into the upper part of the atmosphere. A very well-developed anticyclone over the top of it, meaning that the air is able to come in at the center, counterclockwise obviously, unimpeded, so it's got great inflow. And then up at the upper levels of the atmosphere, that air is getting spun out clockwise with a very solid area of upper level high pressure above it. The wind shear is light enough that those thunderstorms are able to go up vertically and really draw in that very warm and energy-laden air from the anomalously warm Atlantic. It's above normal. We've been talking about that for months. We've seen this coming. This is not a surprise, even though it is shocking to see it in person like this. And it is. It's shocking to see this when you think it's only June 30th. And this is very important because this shows us that we are already ready for major hurricanes to form in the Atlantic Basin. So the ACE score, the accumulated cyclone energy, that is a metric that scientists use to understand the quality of hurricanes, tropical storms too, but mainly hurricanes. Short-lived, weak systems don't get a big ACE point. It's like a basketball player not scoring very many points in a game despite their, good reputation or whatever. Maybe they have a bad night. Or a mediocre player or a star player goes off and they have a record night. That's something similar to this when you get these hurricanes like Beryl that are overachieving. This is going to be a high ACE producer, and it might go on, I think, to be the single biggest ACE producer this early in the season in history as well. So we're breaking records here with what is happening in the early part of the hurricane season. And it is important to keep that in mind because it will hopefully motivate you to be prepared and whatever that means for, your situation. So let's just look at the old Twitter here. And I realize it's called something else, but to me it's always Twitter. At some of the things people are saying over in the For You part, just randomly, right? How's my algorithm doing? Well, look at this. Beryl intensified overnight to a major hurricane. Amazingly, this is exactly what yesterday morning's HMON run showed. That's a computer model just for hurricanes. Fox weather, Beryl becomes first major hurricane of the season, farther east in the Atlantic than any other June Category 3 hurricane on record. CJ here, and some of these people, I don't know who they are, but just pointing them out. It cannot be underscored how historic of a situation this is. To have a major hurricane east of the Lesser Antilles in June is a feat no season, not even 1933, the highest ACE-producing season that we know of, or 2005, and we all remember that. We are surpassing those two benchmark years, and that is absolutely a very bad signal. And then here, this is really interesting here, the new Air Force recon, and really, seriously, real quick, major thanks to the men and women that work in the recon unit there of the 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Unit out of Keesler. They are flying these old freaking planes into these things to study them and get this information. We owe so much to them, and I'm not just trying to pander to them and, it is absolutely my sincere appreciation for sure that we get this data, because without it, we wouldn't know. So, wow. And they are flying some seriously old planes. That needs to get modernized, but story for another day. But yeah, the hurricane is intensifying even as we speak. This is a very serious situation. It really is. So I want to switch over here, and we need to take some actionable information and do something with it. I can tell you about all these ominous facts all day long, and that's not really helpful in the long term of, okay, what am I supposed to do about it? So let's talk about impacts just for a little bit here. So we know that our hurricane is a Category 3 sitting over here. And by the way, the ADM advisory, this is off of our interactive tracking map on our HurricaneTrack Insider site, part of HurricaneTrack.com. And this is the Patreon supported side of our site, in case you're interested in having access to this. Wish we could make it free for everybody, but then I wouldn't have a job, and it would crash because a million people would use it. That's just how that works. So it's interesting that we can see this. This is the 8 a.m. Intermediate Advisory Update, and it's just slightly south of track forecast. You see that? I see it. That's pretty interesting. It's not probably a big deal overall, but once we get to this part of the track forecast in the islands over here, then it is going to be a problem. You know, you think about St. Vincent and the Grenadines over here. Where does the core go through? Because it is a fairly small core, and we can go back to the satellite imagery here and show you, Beryl is not a large hurricane, and the hurricane force winds don't extend out very far at all from the center. So as this comes through, and most people down here understand this, only a small area is going to receive even tropical storm force winds. We will talk more about that in tomorrow morning's update as we get better wind field data. I'll dig into that a little bit more because we'll have time before this arrives. All right? So Barbados, not in the cone, the forecast cone as we call it, and the forecast cone tells us nothing about impacts. That's just where the center should be most of the time. That is a very simple way to understand it. So Barbados up here could get some squally weather, but I don't think you're going to get direct impacts from the core. That does not look likely. So that's pretty good news in this situation for our friends, over there in Barbados. Got up early this morning. My throat needs to be cleared. Sorry about that. But up here in some of these islands, and the smaller islands, of course, we could have absolutely direct impacts. So this is where people need to be preparing the most for hurricane force wind, storm surge in some of the areas where you get onshore flow, the heads of different bays down there where ships and boats and whatnot are docked. Stuff's going to blow around. You're going to get heavy rain. You know, it's a hurricane, and it is headed your way. And then it gets into the Caribbean where normally systems through here just die off this time of year. But I think it's clear that 2024 is not behaving normally, whatever. So the current forecast track out here at days 3, 4, and 5 take the center south of Jamaica. So while you might be sitting here in Kingston or Montego Bay or elsewhere saying, oh, it is not going to hit here, Well, maybe the eye won't go across Jamaica, but Jamaica would be on the north side. And then you just have to think about it really carefully. Let's get rid of my telestration there. I want to remind you, that is the hurricane, not the little dot. The eye is the eye, and that's got calm weather. But when you look at a track map, even like ours, as sophisticated as it is, the center, the core, could pass south of Jamaica. But what about all that precip on the top side, the north side? And you got mountains in here. Jamaica, unless this shifts much farther to the south, will see impacts. And conversely, the closer this tracks to Jamaica, the more those impacts will be. Same thing over here for the peninsula of Haiti. Not even in the cone, but Haiti could still have impacts from heavy rain, from those rain bands. So I urge people to continue to understand, please, that a hurricane is not a point on a map. And just because it, meaning the center, isn't forecast to pass over your location, doesn't mean that you won't receive impacts. And rain down here in the deep tropics, in some of these mountainous countries, is a significant, if not the most significant, impact. And I'm going to say that again. Rain is the most significant impact because it can create landslides and flooding, the likes of which some people have never seen. It is a terrifying thing to have walls of water cascading down some of these higher elevation areas into the lower elevation villages and towns and cities. Rivers swell up, that kind of thing. So please, if you're down there, you know people down there, you can translate this into whatever language people might be speaking in some of these areas that's outside of English. Please do that and emphasize that four-letter word, rain. Rain is the impact that I'm most concerned about for these areas, even, and that's including, I'm going to be honest with you, the islands over here that this is going to go through first, because they are also, they have that orographic lift. They've got mountains. The geology there plays a big role in this. We can hide from the wind. You hunker down, you get away from the wind. We can use our brains to do that. But when walls of water come through, there's just not much you can do. And it is a terrifying, it really is terrifying situation, and people need to keep that in mind. Beyond Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, again, on the north side of that circulation, doesn't mean there won't be impacts. And of course, this is day 4, this is day 5, and I know that there's a lot of people that have potential cruise and vacation interests through this area. You need to be checking whether it's Royal Caribbean or Carnival or whomever, and just make sure you stay on top of it. There could be itinerary changes, ports of call changes, and just to pitch something that I did recently, if you are new to our YouTube channel, we do have a playlist called Hurricane U, like Hurricane University. The most recent edition just happens to be with Royal Caribbean's meteorologist Craig Setzer, and I encourage you to watch that Hurricane U episode. I just recently posted it. It's basically a podcast called Hurricane U, and I'll put a link to it in the description. Let's just make it easy. And Craig talks all about how Royal Caribbean deals with itineraries that are crossing the paths or whatever of hurricanes. So it's very helpful. And look, we got to make people take cruises during hurricane season. You might be flying to some of these places. You just got to be paying attention. You got to put it on you, beyond what I'm telling you, to stay on top of this stuff. I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen at your location 4 days from now. Nobody can. All right, let's look at a couple things in the forecast realm, because that's where a lot of people understandably have a lot of questions. This is a really unique tool set here, and I'm going to put this into motion. Watch, I think I am. Let's go down here and start it. Watch how this stuff progresses. This is going through time, and there's a lot going on here. The overall intensity guidance is up, 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 as you can clearly see. The deep layer shear, and this is really interesting. I want to go down here, get rid of my telestration. I want to point something out. Deep layer shear, that's what affects these things and causes them to weaken. And when it's strong, but when it's not strong, it can cause them to strengthen pretty significantly. So notice as we get through time here what the shear is doing. All right, and it goes down to its lowest point tomorrow. That's like right when it's knocking on the door of the windwards. And the three big models here that we're looking at, the GFS and the two hurricane models, the H-MON and the H-WRF, all agree that the shear would be very low tomorrow. And then it starts to gradually increase, but not destructively. We're not seeing it go way up here in 30, 40 knots of shear. And the shear, of course, is what separates the thunderstorms from the center of circulation. Sea surface temperatures, they are above normal, so they stay pretty steady. There's not, the GFS, that's got to be a little like data error deal right there, that little dip. But sea surface temperatures 28 degrees Celsius or warmer, plenty warm as we see, that's not even an issue. And the mid-level relative humidity, which is very important, that's the energy here, that's a little bit of a decline over the next few days, but it's this first part right over here as it approaches the islands that I'm very concerned about, that this could potentially reach a solid Category 4. And in that case, yes, the wind is a lot more problematic. But I'm going to still think that the rain is my biggest fear here in terms of life-threatening impacts. And to put this back into motion, checking out the track here, this is the best track, which is the Hurricane Center track, and the official, that's like a historic track. The official is this line. But then you got the GFS, H-MON, H-WRF, and the Euro in here. And what I want to point out is the very tight clustering of the guidance into the Caribbean, slightly south in the last few runs, and then just a tick north of the envelope in the most recent couple of runs. It's very subtle, but we're seeing these shifts, and we're going to have to watch and see what happens post-Yucatan, if it even makes it to there. And I'll explain what I mean by that in just a moment. Last thing I want to point out here before we get into some of the models and deeper into those weeds, so to speak, the upper ocean heat content. This looks like an old 8-bit graphic, I know, but whatever, it gets the point across. This is where it is now, and it's over decent upper ocean heat content. And what does that mean, upper ocean heat content? It's not just the skin of the ocean that's warm. That warm water extends down deep, tens of meters, maybe a couple hundred meters, whatever the case may be. And when that warm water is really deep, you get the bigger color gradient. That's a simple way to look at it. And so your highest ocean heat content is through here, and then right before it gets to the islands there, a little bit of a dip. Believe me, the water temperatures are plenty warm, but the upper ocean heat content, more fuel under the surface, is across the central and towards the western Caribbean. So this could stay really strong for quite a long time if any of those other factors, the shear and the relative humidity, are more favorable than the models are giving credit for. So just something to point out. So let's look at the global model here. We could spend an hour on the models, but we don't want to do that. GFS, we just don't have time for it, right? This is the global forecast system. This is down at 10 meters above the Earth, so basically where we live. And there's Beryl, clearly. And let's point out a couple of things. We got Beryl here. This is 96L over here. Doesn't look like much yet. And then this is 94L, which still has a shot at maybe making something of itself. So we already know the intensity on the GFS is off. It is stronger than the GFS was showing. So let's just look at the track. It goes through the Windward Islands there. Exactly where, we don't know. Already been over that. And then into the Caribbean, Beryl goes, getting close enough to Hispaniola to certainly bring some rain on the north side. Close enough to Jamaica, the GFS is darn close. But then notice too, this next system, which would be Chris if it gets named, also looking like hurricane intensity, potentially, and it's knocking on the door of the general same area that Beryl just went through. And we got to start thinking about that. I know we've got Beryl on the top of our mind right now, but soon to be Chris, fairly soon, this is like, what is even going on? Really, this early in the season, to have two of these like this, we really are again looking at something like 2005, where we had Dennis and Emily, two intense hurricanes early in that hurricane season. This is even earlier than that. And we all remember how 05 turned out. So Beryl gets in here, that's 90 hours, there's 96, goes across the northern Yucatan, weakens significantly, thank goodness, and then makes its way as we get out here to a week's time, looking like it might threaten Texas. Now, I don't like to look beyond 5 days because that's all that the Hurricane Center forecast shows, but I know people are very, very interested and curious about it. Yes, there is the potential at day 7, but look, that is a week out. Can you imagine what kind of an area we could be talking about down here? There's no telling, because the Euro brings it right into Mexico down here, not even close to Texas. So don't let the Texas threat weigh on your mind too much, because I know you see it. I know you see it on social media, and I'm showing you here in context. Of course it's a possibility. It's absolutely a possibility it could go to Texas, because it's so far out in time that the ensemble members of all the different models do show that. Some of them, but some of them don't. We just don't know. So don't start worrying about it in Texas yet, but be thinking about it. Okay, what am I going to do if Beryl heads my way? All right, and then we have to watch what happens with Chris, with everything. So another way to look at all this is through the anomalies of the steering layer of the atmosphere. All of this red, a simple look tells me that the high pressure area over the Atlantic Basin, A, is pretty much connected all the way across. No big, this blue here, this is a trough. And these gradients of the blue is the anomalous heights in the atmosphere. In other words, how strong the trough is. And conversely, the different gradation of these reds in here are the height anomalies of the 500 millibar level of the atmosphere. How much air is out there, the mountain of air. And that 594 height line connected all the way across, all the way over to Texas. That is very, very easy to explain why this system is not turning north and out to sea. Because this is a huge mountain of air. It's in the way. It can't. It's just physics, right? So if we scroll this through time, look at what happens. It keeps both of those systems buried down in the Caribbean. They are not close enough to this weakness through here for it to turn north, any of them. And then we get the heights building back a little bit. There's a smaller height line over here over the southeast, but as we go through time, stuff changes. You see that? If I can get it to work, things change, and we start to lose that ridging, and that's what we got to watch for. We start out with this, where everything's connected. We end up, let's just look at day 5. Let's just end it there. This piece of energy coming down could knock down that ridge enough that, yes, there could be an alleyway up through here, including possibly to Texas. But that's 5 days out, and then in days 6 and 7, it's even more uncertain as to what will happen. The HWRF model, hurricane intensity and track and everything specific. This is not a global model. Again, it's already off. The pressure is way lower than 979, so it's already off because Beryl is already stronger. Nevertheless, the HWRF takes this into and through the Windward Islands, and you can see the simulated radar here basically. And yeah, this is not exactly what's going to happen, but yes, the rain bands could affect Barbados. Small, compact core, and in this situation, which island does the core go over? Well, you can see right here, and if you live in any of these areas, you might be worried to death about it, but we just don't know. Where is this going to track for sure? Every mile is going to matter. And then Beryl gets into the Caribbean. There's Jamaica, and to my point, heavy rain over Jamaica. So, and that easterly flow will really pile it up. And it's going to be, a major flooding concern for Jamaica. And then the Cayman Islands start to come into view right through here, possibly some squally weather for them. Interestingly enough, the HWRF really strengthens it down to 942. It's not seeing the shear and the decrease in relative humidity, and it makes landfall on the Yucatan Peninsula very strong there. We'll see about that. The HWRF sometimes can overdo it. You just hate it because you never know when it's got it right. That's one of the problems with this. And intensity forecasting is the most difficult side of hurricane forecasting. Interestingly enough, though, the HMON, also a hurricane-specific model, strengthens this more as it gets into the Caribbean. You understand, from where it is now, it also strengthens it more. And it also gets it close to Jamaica, heavy rain, the Cayman Islands to the north and northwest there, also some squally weather, much closer to Grand Cayman here, right? So we're going to have to watch this. And it brings it in towards the Yucatan at a respectable hurricane intensity there. So, we got a lot to watch here. This is going to be a very stressful situation for a lot of people. First, in the Windward Islands, and then everybody's going to be watching it in the Caribbean, Jamaica, Hispaniola as a whole, certainly the Yucatan, the Cayman Islands, and people in Texas, even Louisiana. We don't know. That long-term part is so questionable. So just be careful of what you see on social media, of any grandiose statements that make it deterministic. Oh, it's coming here, it's coming there. And then also remember that word, it. That's the hurricane. The whole big thing, not just some dot on a map. All right? So real quick, a huge thank you to all the new subscribers to the YouTube channel. That is where we do most of our public outreach with this type of video. We do have a great playlist of all kinds of other stuff, so please subscribe to the channel for your own benefit. I mean, look, it's great to see the numbers go up. That means people are watching what I'm doing, but we do put a great deal of stuff out there for the public good, so take advantage of it. I do this for you guys, and all of us at the HurricaneTrack family appreciate you tuning in. It's a great community. We are supported via Patreon. You can check that out, patreon.com/HurricaneTrack, or search Hurricane, T-R-A-C-K, not Tracker, but just HurricaneTrack in Patreon or anywhere on social media. HurricaneTrack, that's us. We appreciate you watching. I'm Mark Setzer. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow morning.